we might have just bought the rarest production dirt bike ever built. It's so rare that until 2 days ago, I didn't even know it existed. This is the ABD Avenger, the most American motocross machine you'll ever find. As you can see, it's a pretty unique looking bike. And as I said, it's incredibly rare. For comparison, the supercar giants Bugatti made and sold 450 Veyrons in the 10 years that car was in production from 2005 until 2015. Whereas ABD reportedly only built 10 of these things. In my books, that makes this machine, the Avenger, 45 times more rare than a Bugatti Veyron. I've never heard of another manufacturer producing bikes in such low numbers, so there must be an interesting reason for that rarity. Why did they only make a literal handful? After doing some research, I found out that this bike has one of the wildest backstories that I've ever heard of. So buckle up, because this tale has more twists and more turns than a lap around the Nürburgring. To fully understand how this thing came to be, there are a few different companies, characters and personalities that we need to know about. So let's head back to the beginning and lay down the foundations for the saga that would eventually lead to the creation of a machine that Captain America himself would be truly proud of. Our story today begins with one man. He's a man that you might not have heard of, but you might know about some of his designs and creations. That man is Horst Leitner, one of the most legendary motorcycle designers of all time. Leitner was born in Austria, but he spent the majority of his working life based in the US. In the 1960s, he was a Grand Prix racer and an ISDT competitor. But he was also an engineer and a designer. Early in his career, Horst made a name for himself with his innovative ideas on chain torque. He then designed and built motocross frames that would accept Honda XR350 engines. By the mid-1980s, Horst had built quite the reputation, and he had garnered the attention of the Puch family, who approached Leitner with the idea of creating a new motorcycle brand that used Rotax 4-stroke motors. With Puch, Rotax and Horst all having Austrian origins, it made sense. This was the birth of ATK, the American 4-stroke icon. Horst Leitner achieved a lot in his long career, but in the motocross world it's ATK that he's most known for. Sure, ATK isn't the most famous motocross brand of all time, but there is an argument to say that ATK are the most famous and the most successful American motocross brand in history. I know I mentioned the Austrian origins just a second ago, but to be fair, the ATK HQ was in California. Years before the mainstream 4-stroke explosion of the late 90s and early 2000s, these 560 and 600cc ATKs were big hits. And for a while there in the 90s, ATK were actually the 5th largest off-road motorcycle manufacturer in the USA, behind the Japanese Big Four. Horst Leitner's ATK machines were known for their interesting and innovative design ideas, such as side-mounted gas caps, rear-facing brake pedals, and rear brakes mounted on a countershaft sprocket. ATK were obviously famous as being the 4-stroke guys, but in the late 80s, an ATK 2-stroke did actually hit the market. The 406 2-stroke has a wild backstory all of its own, involving Rotax, Can-Am and Horst Leitner. I'd love to tell that tale one day if I can get my hands on one of those 406 two-strokes. So if you know the whereabouts of one of those ATK 406s, please let me know. Through these early years, Horst was able to build up ATK to become a pretty sizable company. But as the years went on, it became clear to Horst and the people around him that in his heart, he wanted to be a motorcycle designer rather than the leader of a motorcycle manufacturer. So, inevitably, Horst Leitner eventually sold off ATK, and in the 90s he set up a design house called AMP Research. Leitner was still involved in the motorcycle industry through his work at AMP. Famously, he was involved in designing a prototype KTM 125 in the early 90s when KTM were in financial troubles, which has a wild story all of its own. But alongside this motorcycle industry work, Horst also broadened his horizons, getting involved in all sorts of different industries such as automotive and cycling. His Horst Link suspension system actually landed him in the Mountain Bike Hall of Fame. Years later, Horst eventually sold his company for a reported $30 million. Like I said, that's quite a legendary career. But how does all of that link to the ABD Avenger here? Well, all will be explained, but just know for now that this isn't the last time we'll hear the name Horst Leitner in this tale. We wouldn't be able to make videos like this one without the support of our awesome sponsors, Produciton Motorcycle Oils. All of these machines behind me here make use of Produciton motorcycle oils to keep them lubed, to clean them as well. Produciton have you covered for all your motorcycle lubricants, oils and cleaning products. They've got an awesome feature on their website. If you head over there, type in your bike model into their search bar, they'll bring up all of the products they recommend you need for your ride. As always, a massive thank you goes to Produciton for supporting what we do. There's links in the description down below. So, what happened next? Well, the history gets a little murky here, but this is the story as I understand it. After Leitner's departure, ATK were a little lost without their founder. But in stepped a man called Ken Wilkes to take the lead. Ken had actually come on board as an investor in ATK when Horst was still around. But when Leitner wanted out of the company in the early 90s, he sold all of his shares to Ken Wilkes. And this is where the story gets a little more complicated and a lot less clear. When Ken took over, he was in desperate need of some further capital to expand the company and really take it into the mainstream. And I believe he did find that investment, and it came from a Utah-based investment group headed up by Frank White and his dad, Dale. They took over control of ATK and moved the headquarters from California over to Utah. Versions of the story differ from here. Either Ken Wilkes was pushed out of the company, or he was looking to wash his hands of ATK to start his own venture. But whatever the case may be, that partnership certainly went sour. And eventually Ken Wilkes went off to create his own company called American Dirt Bike, or ADB, where he was mainly selling off his stockpile of spares and parts for the older ATK models. So I believe at this time in the 90s, the guys in Utah were manufacturing new ATK machines, whilst Ken was somewhere else selling old parts. Like I said, it got a little messy and a little confusing for the ATK owners and fans around the world. From there, the ATK story continued and continues to be a fascinating tale. But that's not the story we are telling today. We are here to talk about this bike. So where and when does the Avenger come into it? Well, hang on a second, I'm getting to that part. But before that, there's yet another company that we need to know about. Yep, there's another layer to this story that we need to unpack. Whilst all of those ATK shenanigans were going on in the States, there was a company here in the UK called PBH who were on a mission to build their own four-stroke motocrosser. It was the late 80s, and around the world there were smaller companies like ATK and CCM that were proving that the smaller guys could build competitive four-stroke machines. And this inspired a lot of people to try and do the same sort of thing. And one of those guys was a man called Mike George. And he was also a long-standing member of the UK motocross scene, and he was great friends with the legendary Scottish Grand Prix racer, Vic Allen. The PBH crew decided to have a bash at building their own 600cc four-stroke. And they hired a design house called AMP Research to design and build a prototype machine. And with that, Horst Leitner re-enters our story. The bike that came out of this endeavour was the PBH Scott, which was a tip of the hat to Vic Allen, and it was actually the last ever dirt bike designed by Horst Leitner. There aren't too many details and images of this prototype Scott, but as you can see from these images I found online, the PBH was a classic Horst Leitner design with a straight rectangular chromoly frame, countershaft disc brakes, a laid down no-link shock and an ultra slim figure, which all seems a little familiar. And with that, the PBH Scott was born. But was it a success, and did it make it into production? The short and simple answer is no. No, they were not. I've heard that about only 30 of these Scotts were built in the short time that PBH were around. Eventually, the PBH motorcycle division was shut down. I guess Mr. George realised that running a motorcycle company was a great way to hemorrhage money, so instead he focused on his main money-making businesses. With that then, the final Horst Leitner designed dirt bike was dead. Or was it? As you might have guessed, there's another wrinkle to this story. I just need to say a big thank you to our friends over at Seat Concepts. Both of these machines here, Kong and the Black Panther, are rocking the Seat Concept seat, and I absolutely love them. You can get a Seat Concept seat for your motocross bike, enduro bike, even your adventure bike in different shapes, colours and sizes. They're handcrafted in the USA and shipped worldwide. I've left a link in the description down below so you can check them out. You can also get 15% off if you use our discount code 999laser. As always, a huge thanks goes to Seat Concepts for supporting the channel and providing the comfiest seat in the house. With PBH now out of the motorcycle business, there was suddenly a small stockpile of Horst Leitner designed bikes up for grabs. And a certain Mr. Ken Wilkes was seriously interested in acquiring these very ATK-like machines. Eventually, Ken was able to get his hands on the PBH inventory, and he got it all shipped over to him in the States. When the bikes landed with Ken, he decided to give them a radical new makeover and rebrand them as the ABD Avengers, which was a direct jab at the new people in charge of ATK. I guess Ken was determined to avenge his losses in any way he could after that ATK deal went south. Which might sound a little bit petty, but in my opinion, it's one of the most interesting reasons behind a motorcycle name that I've ever heard of. There was obviously a very limited amount of stock here. There obviously wasn't a huge stockpile of parts from PBH in the first place, but I think Ken must have had a relationship with Rotax, and he must have been able to get hold of engines and spare parts for the motors from them. But rumour has it that ATK actually put pressure on Rotax to stop the supply of engines to ADB. It's unclear how many ADB Avengers were actually made and sold. Like we said, there can't have been much available from PBH in the first place. I have read in multiple places that only 10 were ever built. No matter what, whether 10 were made or 20 or 50, the ADB Avenger is a very, very rare motorcycle with a wild backstory and an even wilder design. And we have one here which is absolutely bonkers. Let me give you a close look at some of the details. The Avenger used a single-cylinder 4-stroke Rotax motor, which you can see down here. It was of course air-cooled, and I believe you could actually pick what size you wanted, whether it was a 300, a 600, you could tune them up to a 635, but ours here is a 560. The bike featured the familiar Leitner chromoly box frame and of course the laid down rear shocks. There were stainless steel header pipes up front and an Ali Supertrap silencer at the back, which our machine is missing. Up front there were WP upside down forks, an alloy billet, triple clamps, again, which this bike is missing. The bikes were finished off with this crazy looking plastic bodywork, which must have acted like a sail in the wind, but they also must have turned some heads as well. In terms of measurements, the wheelbase was 58 inches, the ground clearance was 13.5 inches, seat height was 36 inches, and the overall weight was 259 pounds. The bike had a 38mm Marconi flat side carb, again, which this one doesn't have. This has a Dell'Orto carb. Also, it was supposed to have counter shaft disc brakes, which again, this bike doesn't have, which doesn't sound right. Like, things aren't adding up here. There's a lot of features that we're missing, so what is going on? Okay, I've got something to admit. From the start, I've had my suspicions about this bike. At the beginning, before we bought it, I did think it was a real deal Avenger. But after doing some research, I realised there were some small details on this bike that didn't match the pictures and videos I've seen of other Avengers online. The swing arm was the main thing that looked different to us. And then when I looked into it, this machine actually looks more similar to the Horst Leitner prototype machines than the bikes that Ken Wilkes eventually sold. So, what on earth is this thing? Because it certainly isn't an ADB made Avenger. After a brief moment of disappointment, when we realised that we hadn't found a true Avenger, or what I thought to be a true Avenger, I became more intrigued to learn more. So I decided to proceed with buying the bike with the intention of unveiling its original origins, and to be honest, that got me even more excited. To my astonishment, we've actually been able to track down the guys that built our bike back in the 90s. So let's find out what we've got on our hands here, because it's certainly not what we first thought it was.
Hi, yeah, I'm Danny Wise. I built the bike that you've got from parts that we purchased from PBH when they finished building their bikes in, I'd say, '93. The bike itself was designed and built by PBH, but it was very much a Horst Leitner design. Well, Ken Wilkes had bought ATK and then he sold it again. And the old ATK, which was then Ken Wilkes, they approached us looking for a PBH. Clearly looking for a PBH because they wanted a new bike. They knew that it was a Horst design, so it was very similar and a lot of ATK parts on the bike. They approached us for that, and I mean, whether they knew or they were just very lucky, but we'd bought everything that PBH had got when they finished production. I think that the bike would have been more successful. I think timing was a big part of it. Husaberg had come out, Husqvarnas were very good, CCM had made a comeback, the ATKs we got at the time were also very good. So it was a tough time to come into the market with another four-stroke. The guys then in America built the Avenger, and your Avenger is basically, it is a PBH. I built it from new parts, but it just has subframe, seat tank unit, and the cowlings from American dirt bike, from the guys in America that built the Avenger.
Okay, yes, because I was going to say the pictures I've seen of other Avengers look slightly different. The swing arm looks slightly different.
You'll see their prototype pictures are the same as yours, because their prototype bike was the bikes that I sent them 2 frame kits. So their prototype bikes were PBHs. The only differences they made is chain adjusters on the swinging arm were then ATK ones, which were an improvement than that concentric adjuster. They just changed a few bits and pieces. They put the ATK reverse brake pedal on. All the American Avengers, as well as that rear-facing brake, would have the countershaft brake on it.
Yeah.
Okay, and you obviously know the countershaft brake from looking at, if you've been doing your research, you know the ATKs had them. Tell
us, how many of those bikes did he make, build or sell?
I'm told there was only 10 sets of the panels. I've got guys that I talk to in America that have got, one guy's definitely got 2 of them. There are a few Avengers without the panels. a couple with the big ATK enduro fuel tank on, that sort of thing. So there'll be a few, but I mean, if there's 15 of these things, that'll be tops.
That's crazy.
And there was probably only 30 PBHs, but I'm not sure. You'd have to check on that. So the motor, I think it was an opportunistic thing. The motor happened to be on the bench at the time. It's an 89 CCM spec motor, which is a steel liner with a head gasket, and all the Rotaxes, ATK and the other brands from 89 onwards were all Nicosil bore, and they don't have a head gasket, they just have O-rings on. And also CCM Rotaxes at that time didn't have a balance shaft in them.
What were you guys, an ATK dealer or?
We were the ATK importers.
Importers for the UK.
My brothers had ridden for Tim Chambers, who was the ATK importer in the 80s. Simon made top 40 on a 4-stroke he was the first 4-stroke in 10 years to make top 40, and things were going really good. But also, like PBH, funny enough, Tim Chambers had got business commitments.
Yeah.
And then we ended up taking on ATK, which was a bit of a bizarre twist, but it was good. I was basically a school leaver at the time, and so I loved it. It was great for me. So
Ken was really wanting you to import the ABD Avengers.
Absolutely, yes, yeah. If I'd rung him up with an order, he'd have been very pleased.
But you did race the bike that we've got, right? Or it did get raced?
Vince is he's the middle brother. He raced the bike for half a season probably. I don't feel we did get it as good as an ATK, but we knew our ATKs very well, so it was probably easier to go back to that.
Did you just build the one?
Yes, yeah.
So there's only one of these things in this configuration in the world?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So there's only one PBH with the Avenger kit on it as such. Anything else that's got that frame in the UK will be a PBH.
So this thing isn't a true Avenger. It's not one of the handful that Ken Wilkes sold at the end of the 90s, but it does share an awful lot of DNA with those machines. Like I said, this does look more like those Leitner prototypes that you can see pictures of online, which is very, very cool. And as Danny Wise said, the Wise brothers only built one of these things to go and race here in the UK, which makes it even rarer than the real thing, even rarer than the true Avengers, which is very, very cool. Although we can't really call this a production bike, can we? But I have bought it, it is mine. We've got yet another weird and wonderful thing to add to our unique collection. What's funny though is that at the start of the video, I called this thing the most American dirt bike you could ever find, when in fact, it was designed by an Austrian, it was commissioned by Brits, it was raced here in England, and as far as we know, this machine has never left the UK. It's been sat in a collection for quite a few years now, but you guys know we don't like to leave our bikes dormant. We like to ride the weird and wonderful things we find on our adventures. So let's find out if this thing is a runner. Okay, so I'm going to try and start the beast now. It's obviously a thumper from the 90s with a left-sided kicker. We've not mentioned that yet. It's a left-sided kicker, great, I love those, don't I? So I'm going to try and start this now, which might be easier said than done. The man that we bought the bike from did explain to me the best procedure to do it. It's a little bit complicated, but I believe the bike's ready to go. There's a decomp that I'm not supposed to use now. There's a choke here, and I'm not supposed to use a throttle, so let's give it a whirl. Oh. So I've never had the chance to ride a bike like this, a 90s 4-stroke, a pre-YZ400 4-stroke. Wonder what it feels like to ride, eh? Let's find out.